I'm sure I'm going to get crucified by a bunch of my progressive followers for this one. I don't think UBI is a good idea. I feel that the reasoning behind wanting to implement universal basic income is in the right place, but the math on the economics just doesn't math. Now, first of all, universal basic income is all based on theory because no country has really implemented it on any type of scale that we can draw any widespread conclusions from or really analog to the United States. Now, a lot of countries and even some states have tried some pilot programs experimenting with UBI, but it's with small groups of the population or for very short periods of time. And one of my initial issues with UBI is that it redistributes wealth in one of the ways that we're trying to avoid. So for the purpose of this video, we're just going to use $1,000 a month. I don't really care what the number is. So by the nature of it being universal basic income, that means everybody gets it. Doesn't matter how much money you make or how much wealth you have. So that would mean that lower and middle class citizens are paying tax money in to send wealthy citizens a $1,000 monthly check. And although that's not entirely defeating the purpose of what it's trying to achieve, it is taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back in terms of equity and wealth equality. Now, in theory, we could raise taxes on the wealthy to adjust for that problem. It's not an insurmountable issue, it's just a issue. My main issue is that due to the nature of economics, giving everybody $1,000 a month is just going to increase the cost of living by $1,000 a month. And this is because it doesn't do anything to address the supply issues that cause the price issues in the first place. For example, housing right now is very expensive. And it's expensive because there's a shortage of supply. There is not enough available housing on the market for the people who need it. Now, there's lots of reasons for that housing shortage, from companies buying up all kinds of housing to turn into short-term rentals, to a shortage of contractors putting up new housing and affordable housing, to building material supplies and cost. Lots of reasons. That would be a whole video by itself, not what this one's about. Just suffice it to say for now that there is a shortage of available housing. We can all agree on that. As a result, demand has outpaced supply and prices have gone up accordingly. And as that price goes up, it limits the amount of people who can afford housing on their own, and therefore they're forced to split those costs with roommates or moving back in with their parents, and that price corrects the demand to meet the available supply. So now you look at all these people struggling to pay rent and you say, man, rent is $1,000 a month. If we gave everybody $1,000 a month, then they'd be able to afford their rent without breaking the bank. They'd have some financial security and life would be better for everybody. But in this scenario, the supply issue has remained unchanged. So now it starts off, people get this extra $1,000 a month and they're like, hey, I can afford a place on my own. Except there is no places for them to rent on their own because the supply is still exactly the same. So then all we've done is raise the price by $1,000 to consolidate the demand to fit our current supply. And now, because of that inflation, everybody still has the same roommates, but double the rent and less buying power per dollar than they had before universal basic income. And that's a problem that I don't think is solvable because when it comes to economics, you have to stay within the supply and demand issue. So all UBI would do is increase demand until it's offset with inflation, and that is bad. So in my opinion, the best way to solve these issues would be addressing the supply problems. And one of the best ways to do this is state and federal investment in affordable housing. And this is in theory. This has been historically demonstrated and checks out economically. From FDR's New Deal through the 1960s, state and federal governments invested heavily in housing, mostly middle-class housing. And don't get me wrong, there was a lot of issues with a lot of this policy, redlining, a lot of segregation that came along with this stuff. But ultimately, the result was your grandfather was able to buy a brand new 3-bedroom house for 3 Werther's Originals and some pocket lint. Same thing has been done with agriculture, stabilizing food prices. Public transit does the same thing by helping people who are the most financially unstable avoid expenses like cars and gas and insurance. And things like universal health care and public child care. It increases the supply of these services and therefore decreases the cost and allows people to spend this money elsewhere. And this would have a much larger financial impact on most people's lives than just handing them cash. So investment in things that decrease cost or demand and increase supply helps foundationally correct cost of living issues and also creates a bunch of jobs in the process. And this will bring people into economic stability in balance, where they have their own jobs that are paying for their own housing and their own cost of living. And then we have the resources and infrastructure available to implement strong social safety net programs for the people who are still struggling. If rent's $1,000 a month and there's nothing available to rent, a few $100s a month in housing assistance isn't going to be much help. Or $1,000 a month in universal basic income isn't going to be much help. But if we've invested to make sure that there's a surplus of housing, so the housing's affordable and available, That same value of housing assistance goes a lot further, and in theory, there should be a lot less people needing it because the housing's more affordable. So as a society, if we invest in the root cause of these cost of living issues, we become much more capable as a country of meeting the needs of all of our citizens than we would be if we just start throwing money at them. Now, feel free to crucify me in the comments about this or point out things that I may have missed, but I just genuinely do not see universal basic income as a viable solution to any of our problems.